Hello, everyone. Today we have a specialized plan for you. Hope everybody is doing well. Today I have the pleasure of being joined by Kashbu Jha, CEO of Buy Properly, and Toby Messier, co-CEO of Aquantix. How's it going?
Good.
Good.
So we thought it would be awesome to have you both on today to share with the community, since you both were, well, Toby winning a big $100,000 grand prize last week with National Bank, and Kashbu winning the Public's Choice Award during the Ascension Demo Day. So well, big congrats first and foremost to the both of you. Really exciting stuff. And you both had amazing pitches, but because your pitches were so short, 2 minutes for you, Kashbu, and then 5 minutes for you, Toby, we figured it'd be awesome to learn more about both of your startups and about your story. And then lastly, maybe some tips and tricks for other fintech founders who are perhaps earlier in their journey, and in ways that you could share your experience and your advice such that it could benefit others in the community. So for everyone listening, the format today, we're going to have a sit-down chat starting with Kashbu for 10 minutes. Then we'll chat with you, Toby. And then we'll wrap it up with a general conversation of the three of us, just to see to learn about tips and tricks. One of you, there's some background noise. I'm not sure who it is, but I hear somebody else speaking. So just pointing that out.
Right.
But before we kick it off, I'd love to maybe get a little introduction from the both of you for those who have not heard your pitches. Could you give us a quick elevator pitch? Kashbu would ask if we could start with you.
Sure. So I'm Kushbu Jha. I am the co-founder of Buy Properly. We are an online exchange for fractional real estate investing. In simple terms, we allow people to buy shares of a house or a property, like 2%, 5%, and the minimum that you can invest is as small as 2,500.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I think somebody was doing the dishes over at Toby's place. Toby, I saw you wave. Thanks for that. It's the joys of working from home.
Exactly.
Could
Yeah.
you quickly tell us a bit about Aquantix?
Yeah, for sure. So Aquantix, essentially Aquantix, to answer the question, is my portfolio okay for investors? So on the one hand, that's is my portfolio safe? Meaning, will climate change, social unrest, and other global issues cause me to lose what I've invested or lose my retirement? And on the other hand, it's answering the question, is my portfolio or my investments responsible? So are my investments destroying the environment, or are they causing social injustice? So we are a data provider and an AI and data analytics company who answers these questions for individual investors and for large investment funds.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. Well, thank you for that synopsis to the both of you. And now, so we'll dive deeper, so we could get to know you both better. If anybody listening does have questions live, feel free to type them in, and we'll try to tackle them as well. Toby, I'll just bring you to the backstage. We'll be back with you in about 10 minutes time, and Kashbu will dive in to learn more about Buy Properly. So you gave us a quick rundown, but could you give us a bit about like a story of where how this all started and why you launched Buy Properly?
Sure. So, buying a rental property is always a good way to grow your wealth, and everybody knows that. The problem is, not everybody has the cash. And so, like, a lot of people are just left out of that market. I mean, for me, I was personally struggling to invest. And so I moved to Canada from UK, and we had a lot of options there. Like, you could do fractional, you could do rent to own. So there were a lot of these models because houses are expensive in UK, like crazy expensive. And so when I moved here and I started looking at options on how I could invest, there weren't as many. And I graduated from business school like 6 years ago with a huge debt, like a 200K debt, USD. So I was not a big fan of taking on more debt, and there weren't as many options. So I kept asking people. I think last year, before we did any coding, started or left jobs, etc., we spoke to almost 150 people to just figure out what do people do. Do they struggle with this, or is it just me and thinking in my mind? And realized that people were just struggling. Like they buy a house and they can barely make it, and then that's it for real estate for most of them. And that's why we came up with this option of saying, okay, you can invest small amounts also rather than being left out. A lot of younger millennials, for example, would want to invest, let the money grow, and then when they are ready, buy their house, but then not put everything in the stock market,
A lot
especially
of people,
in the tech sector.
a lot of people are familiar with a REIT,
Yeah.
and I know a lot of people often compare Buy Properly to a REIT. Could you just explain the difference in the model between yours and what a REIT has to offer?
Sure. So if you think in terms of a concept, the overall concept is the same. There's a large piece, and you can buy a small piece of the large piece, basically. But then the similarity ends there, because the way REITs work is you have a large organization that invests in myriads of properties, property management, all of that stuff in that sector. And you are effectively giving your money to the management to say, hey, here's my money, figure out how you can make money, and then give me back the money. So you don't have as much control over how your money is invested. The second big problem with REITs is, especially the ones traded on the stock market, which is the most accessible one to regular people, is they are very highly correlated with the stock market. So right now, the stock markets have completely crashed. So have all the REITs. They're all down. Stock market goes down 30%, REITs go down 30%. They're highly correlated. And if you have any financial goals, ideally you should have a diversified portfolio. So being having all your eggs in one basket, which is the stock market, is not ideal. Real estate is a good balancing. And you can buy normal real estate, except you need tons of money. So fractional is like buying a full house, like a small house. Maybe you bought a tile in that house, kind of a thing. But you choose what you buy. So if I live in the beaches area in Toronto, I don't want another house here. I would rather buy on the west side. There are people in Toronto who like, I would rather buy in Ottawa because I already have one house in Toronto, or I live here. And so it gives you the choice of saying, this is where I want to put my money. Sometimes you want to also invest in the neighborhood. So, like sometimes you can say, hey, I live in Toronto. I want Toronto to grow. So I want to invest in the city where I am, because this is my neighborhood in my area and I want it to become better. Those are options that Buy Properly and fractional investing gives, which you would not get as a REIT.
Mm-hmm. Is Buy Properly the first startup you build and launch?
Yes, sort of. So this is my first startup technically, but I used to work at Amazon, and I did have an opportunity to launch new businesses there. I was fortunate because I had launched interesting business, actually, a used electronics business for US called Trade-In that I had launched for Amazon. And then in Canada, while I was based in Canada, I built and grew a team and launched another business which was called Hazardous Materials. But primarily it was things like perfumes and shaving creams, which have a lot of regulation around them. So I had
That
sort
seems
of.
extremely similar to launching a fractional real estate platform.
It is. So we both of those were platforms, and they were both marketplaces. And I started from scratch. And even within Amazon, I had to like write a business plan, get funding before I could hire any engineers, or rather move them to my team. So it was the whole process of then customer awareness, customer acquisition. So it's kind of very similar journey that I went through. And you always had to make sure that customers are getting the right product, that the safety is taken care of. Similar to now, when we want to make sure that the customers get a good deal. We won't want customers to lose money, for example. So yeah, a lot of parallels.
So then, in your first days and weeks of trying to build Buy Properly, how did you go about it? Because now you've formed a team, you developed an idea, you have traction. What was the inception like, and how was that process for you?
So, like I said, we just went around telling everybody, "Oh, I have this idea. Oh, I have this idea." And then actually there was a VC. He was like, "Yeah, you have this idea, but when will you leave your job and do this full time? I think it's a good idea. You should. Do you have a pitch deck?" And I was like, "No, I don't have a pitch deck actually." I was like, "Okay, I don't read documents. You have to give me a pitch deck." And he's a very well respected VC. I was like, "Okay, let me work on the pitch deck." And then once we had that, then we started talking to more customers, like more potential customers. When we saw everyone was excited, they were like, "Okay, when can I invest?" kind of a thing. So we knew we had interest and there were people and there was a demand. And so we started working on building the product.
Gotcha. And then could you tell us about, because one of the main struggles for all entrepreneurs is getting that first sale.
Yeah.
You especially, that must be pretty tricky, because dealing in real estate, yes, it's fractional for your customers, but you need to, front load and get some properties onto your platform. Could you run us through how you went about doing that?
Yeah, so we were a startup with some funding, very limited, and we couldn't use our money into the property. So the way we did it was we put down the security deposit for the property, and then we had effectively time till closing, which is 90 days, to go get the whole sum of money. And it's one thing to have people interested. It is another when you want them to write you a 10, 20 K check. So it's not $10, $25. We are asking them to write $10,000 and $25,000 checks.
To a little startup that nobody's ever heard of before.
We're a startup, and with no PR, no press releases, no magazines, and been around for 4 months before we started asking for money. But I think I'm grateful to all of the first customers, some of them from the network who were believing in us. We did a lot of things to ensure that there's transparency. There was a very clear house, there was clear description of the legal structure, which ensured that the property and the financials of the property are a separate entity and not part of our startup. And one big question that we used to take head on is like, hey, if my startup goes bankrupt, your investment is still safe because it's a separate legal entity. That will continue to happen. You'll continue to get money. And this proposition is independent of my own existence. So that was an important thing that helped people having an escrow account. We were lucky we have Feskin as our lawyers, so saying that the legal documentation has been approved by them carried some weight. So we did a lot of things to build that trust factor, given we had not had actual presence for long. So I think that's what kind of won people over. Plus, we were very transparent on costs. This is how much we paid the agent, the inspection, the legal, everything was like right in front of the customers. So that's what helped us, I think, convert a lot of these customers.
I think doing that within a 4-month span of launch is commendable. It's not many startups are able to perform such a feat. So that's really cool to see. And then after that, you joined the Ascension program.
Yeah.
And we'll chat about your learnings of then your experience with Toby a bit later, since he did it in 2018 and you in 2020. But now that it's done, what's next for you? What can people expect? How can people follow you? Or what are you looking for?
Yeah, I think so far we were treading cautiously because we hadn't proved that this works and people pay and it actually works and there can be a house. And now that we've done crossed that and said, yeah, this works, I think it's time for us to scale up, add more. I mean, it's an unfortunate context of COVID, but sort of for us an opportunity because we do expect prices to go down, which means we can get some very good deals for our customers. And in such scenarios, people don't want to take on a lot of risk of additional mortgage or debt, and we are an equity investment. So I think in that kind of a context, for us now it's about ensuring that customers who have expressed interest get all the deals because we have a wait list of almost 1,200 customers right now.
Okay. Well, you have some, in French we say the pain sur la planche. Not sure, bread on the on the cutting board, which doesn't sound as good as English, but I'm going to see if Toby is back. I know he just went offline. So Toby, if you're there, I'll be asking you to come back super quickly. But Kashbu, great diving a bit deeper with you and learning more about Buy Properly. Don't go anywhere, because I'd love to come back and just get more of your then experience specifically regarding the Ascension program and how that helped in your journey. But so yeah, we'll be right back with you in about 10 minutes. And now we're going to come back with Toby from Aquantix. How's it going, Toby?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good, good. So congrats, you a hefty sum of money for a national bank prize. So how we spoke briefly after you did win, but how are you still on cloud nine? What was it like after that live event ended? What's happened in the week since?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously I was super happy. The whole team was super happy. We it was hard to celebrate in the usual way because you can't leave home, but we tried anyway. I mean, just hopping on phone calls and video chats, and it was nice. So we had a happy time there. But as I kind of we talked a little bit earlier before the call, we had some things to get back to for our customer on Friday morning. So we ended up just working late Thursday night and didn't take that much time off. And since then, it's really been about reprioritizing our strategy, because National Bank it's a really big deal for us. Essentially, they're a huge partner, and working with them will really change our way of going forward in terms of the whole business development and even product prioritization cycle. So we've really taken this week to let's say improve our platform to really adapt it better to the needs of banks. Because for us, the banking industry is completely new. It's not what we've been with before. And starting to follow up with some of the different VPs and coaches from the National Bank and preparing next steps. So it's been kind of a week of taking a step back, consolidating. What do we have to prioritize now? How can we focus, without getting into doing 10,000 things at once? What's the most important thing we have to be focusing on? And also hiring. We're going to be adding a few people on the team, hopefully 3 people on the team next Monday. So that's exciting. And yeah, pretty much it.
Congrats. I'm sure it's a lot to take in and a lot of new elements to consider, but yeah, it's connecting with the people from it was impressive just to see how much the bank mobilized its high-level execs to participate in this competition. So I'm sure you got a lot of great contacts and resources other than just the cash prize.
Oh, it was huge. I mean, just in terms of learning too, I think I learned tons. We talked about, we're talking about Ascension, accelerator program. Oh, sorry, got a phone ringing here. Just give me 1 second.
It's all good.
Okay. Yeah, the joys of working from home. Yeah, I mean, you were talking about the Ascension program earlier, and the benefits of going through an accelerator with Kashbu. I think it felt almost like an accelerator program with the National Bank, and that's what it was like. Essentially, there's so much coaching involved, and it was really great. The coaches were really great, and as you said, it was high-level execs, but it's people who have a lot of experience in business themselves, who've seen a lot of better moves and less good moves also, and they know how it works working with innovators and startups. They've been there before, I think. So it was really, really helpful having their coaching, and the good thing is, I think it's going to continue, going forward as we work with them. Many of them seem very willing to continue that coaching. So it's pretty good.
Yeah. That's great. So, like I mentioned in the beginning, we heard well, we've been following you for years now.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it's just great that it comes full circle, and
absolutely.
extremely
Yeah.
excited to see what's next. But for those who are maybe newer in the community, could
Mhm.
you share maybe the genesis of Aquantix, and maybe your path over the last
Yeah,
couple of years,
absolutely, for
and maybe
sure.
your background, because you Kashfu was saying earlier, you're like a superhero.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So my background to start, I've been like doing software development since I was young, and I worked on, in a few jobs in software development. And after that, I became a medical doctor. So that's like my main formal education is medicine. And I worked as a doctor for a year, and I also worked as a financial analyst. So I did like those three things. And I used to work as a financial analyst during my summers. So I had summers off during school, this kind of thing. So that was my instead of taking vacations, I'd go work on a trading floor. So,
Whatever your little boy
but,
dreams of.
but I learned a lot. It was really, really great. That was, great times and great experiences. And the way Aquantix came about is that um, myself and one of my friends, who's now co-CEO, co-founder of Aquantix, Stephen, we were both, we'd both done a few kind of projects, entrepreneurial projects before around consulting. So really just having our own little business going on, but it was nothing who was geared like a startup towards solving a very big problem or trying to make something very big in terms of scale. And we were really looking for, what is the next big problem, or what's the big issue for society that we can solve? That was kind of our question. So we went to the Cooperathon in 2018. So it's a competition hosted by Desjardins and others. And one of the questions in the competition there was, how does water affect my investments? And that got us both super curious. I was quite knowledgeable in terms of the financial sector because I had worked for a few years there. Stephen was very knowledgeable about supply chains, operations, and so on. So we just got curious about that question and started working on it as a hobby on the side. And what we progressively understood is that the question of how water affects my investments is actually a big question that has tons of aspects to it, because in traditional investment or finance, you don't think about anything else outside, um, let's say, markets and security prices. You don't think about water. You don't think about climate. You don't think about the environment. You don't think about social issues. You don't think about, you just think about, so how are the security prices moving? What are the standard deviation on the prices and so on? So to us, that both seem like a major issue, a major deal. That in my opinion, the most important question or dilemma we have as a society is how we allocate our resources. As individuals, how do we allocate our time and our resources? As governments, as large investors, what do we do with what we own and what we have? And that's really that question of asset allocation, that question of investment, is a super important question. And if you're not even integrating within that question the environment, questions of water was the initial question, which is a major global issue. You have over 100 million people who don't have access to clean water. If you're not even taking these questions into consideration when you go through that process of allocating your resources, to us it seemed like a major problem. So we discussed with people in the field, and we really understood that there's a really important pain there. On the one hand, it's the pain, as I mentioned earlier quickly, of, are my investments safe? Are there going to be natural disasters or environmental issues, social unrest that could cause me to lose what I've invested? And on the other hand, or lose the assets I've allocated, or that's a pretty large question there. And on the other hand, am I responsible? If you're not integrating these questions, how can you verify or ensure that you're allocating your resources in a way that's beneficial or positive for society at whole? So it started very much as kind of an intellectual question, and then it grew from there in terms trying to solve this problem was a very, very technically difficult question. If I ask how do you combine water or the environment with investing? I mean, they seem like
You go
very
to
separate.
Aquantix.ai.
There you go. Yeah, today now that's it. But before that, it was really, these just seemed like separate fields, essentially, separate, completely different ideas and concepts. And so we, Steve and I as founders, we were both obsessed with, big data and AI, this kind of thing. And we know today, and we understood that's really the way to be able to create a lens, create a sort of a crystal ball in a way to be able to see beyond a simple company or see beyond a simple type of investment to what's actually behind that, what's really happening. And so, we at first developed ourselves, and then we hired a team, well, who are our friends at first, and they're still our friends today. And then we've been just growing from there and helping investors solve that problem. So yeah, that's kind of the story of the genesis, I'd say, in a not too, well, I don't know how much time I just spent talking about that, but tell me if I speak too much.
No, I find it super interesting. I'm just wondering when the movie's going to come out.
Oh yeah. I don't know. Are you interested in filming that, Nicola?
Well, it might be difficult considering, but maybe one day, Toby, we could.
Maybe one day. Okay, I'll get back to you on that. Maybe 10 years or so.
Yeah.
We'll stay in touch.
So over time, you did many different programs and competitions.
Yeah.
We've seen you pivot. Your company, what you pitched last week, I think was even different than last time we spoke a couple of months ago.
Right.
This is not your first startup, right? You had one in the financial planning space.
Exactly.
For doctors.
Exactly.
Could you tell us about your experience though, going from being an MD to not your stereotypical fintech founder? What was that experience like? Building a team, getting a product off the ground, and making your first sales.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. I think so. Training as an MD has positive sides and negative sides to it. The really beneficial side is that you learn to almost as a consultant break down problems into the fundamental issues and then tackle them in a prioritized way, and make sure that you're not leaving anything out, because when you're thinking about somebody's health, if you're neglecting any information, it could potentially be very risky for that individual. So I think I approach building a startup in a similar way, where you have to have really good conversations with whoever you're solving a problem for, break down their problems to their core components, and then prioritize the issues, but making sure you're not leaving anything out. So I think that whole mindset that you learn as a doctor is very, very helpful. But what's very different, and I'd say maybe harder or more interesting in building a startup, is that you don't have any guidelines when you're building a business for a startup. There's no, in medicine, the way it works is that everything is algorithmic. So when you meet someone, you interview them, you ask them questions, if they're conscious anyway, because in emergency they're not always conscious. But even then, you do your physical exam, you do your ultrasound, whatever it is, and you go through a specific set of rules and steps. And depending if the answer is a yes, a no, or what the answer is, it brings you down a certain path, a certain kind of tree algorithm. And depending on what symptoms you find, the details about those symptoms, what tests you have to ask for, depending on the results of the tests, what the diagnosis and the treatment and so on. So you really have that kind of tree algorithm that's pre-made for you, which are the guidelines which you can follow, and then execute on. And if you do that, well, ideally the patient is going to be as healthy as possible. We're going to be giving them the best treatment possible, the best diagnosis, and there's no gray zone. Well, there are some slightly gray zones, but there's no. If you follow and know the guidelines, you can never make a mistake. You can never make a bad move. Whereas when you're building a business, a startup, there aren't really those guidelines, that algorithmic path or steps that you can follow. There's we talk about, understanding the market size, getting traction, getting sales, building a good team, good product. And there's these kind of categories to think about, but there's no specific way to solve those issues. There's no guidelines ahead of time. So I think that's something that's very, very interesting in building a startup. And I think it's something that I have been, I still am trying to integrate that medical guideline process to. When you're building a startup, there is no guidelines. What you have to do is essentially build your guidelines by trial and error. So you make a hypothesis, you clarify what your hypothesis is, and then you test it. And the goal is to test your hypothesis as quickly as you can on the market individuals are talking to, or it can even be a technical hypothesis. It could be product or customer focused. And once you're able to validate or reject that hypothesis, you can build a sort of guideline or a sort of a piece of knowledge that you can enter in your kind of decision-making tree in the future. So I think that's what's really, really interesting, is building that guideline or algorithmic tree structure of decision-making as you build a business, because that decision-making structure is only true for Aquantix. We can't use the same decision-making process for other startups necessarily, because in different markets and different product and so on. But in medicine, you're used to just memorizing that process and working with that. I don't know if that if that makes
the moral
any
of the
sense.
story is, if you want to be a good fintech founder, you have to go to medical school.
There you go. That's it.
Easy.
Yeah. And you also asked about the startup I'd done before. The startup I did before was it's called Omega, Organization for Medical Education and Governance and Administration. It's the long name. It's essentially teaching finance to doctors, so finance and management skills to doctors.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to talk too long about that, but I learned a lot in that, in terms of how do you manage a team, and how do you deal with customers, how do you do the sales process, and how do you develop a product that fulfills needs. So it was similar, but the big difference is that it was a nonprofit. So there was not the whole equity aspect to it or control aspect to it, who comes in being a little bit different. And also the objective was to fulfill a need specifically in Quebec. I went on to have some kind of world initiatives and do some other larger things with it also, but it was not the same mindset, in the sense that it was a local issue, a problem that we had in medical schools here in Quebec that we wanted to solve. That we were able to build a team, we were able to solve the issue and set in a sort of a kind of a constant operation where you have the employees, you have the team who every single year are repeating the same process to solve the issue for the doctors, medical students, and so on. But there was no ambition of solving a global issue that's much larger and much beyond the actual area where you're operating in. So I'd say it's a much more ambitious objective that we have now.
Well, it's great to see.
Yeah.
And if your ambitions are, if you set the bar there, you won't go beyond it. But
there you go.
Rather reach for the stars, and you'll land on the moon. But cool,
Well
Toby.
said.
Thanks so much for sharing your experience over the last couple of years and some lessons learned. But now I'd like to bring back Kashbu, just so we could both chat with two alumni from the Ascension program. So, as I was mentioning earlier, Toby and Stephen participated in Ascension 2018, and now Kashbu just most recently Ascension 2020. So I'd be curious to know your different experiences of the program and what helped you through it, if it did bring value to you and help you along your the building of your respective companies. So Kashbu, since we didn't hear from you in a while, I'd like to kick it off with you so you could share your experience, and then Toby, if you want to follow up and share how it was 2 years ago. And I'm sure there's probably things that changed as well in the program. So to see your perspective and for you guys to compare and contrast.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're asking me like simple questions, like what did you learn from the program? Whereas you were making a movie with Toby. Like I heard you guys plan your Hollywood ventures, eh?
Kashbu, with you, I was thinking more of like a Netflix series,
That's the in thing now. Yeah, accession program for me personally, I would say was like far exceeding my expectation on several counts. One, it was in Montreal, so I was going to be virtual or remote most of the time. But then the world turned remote, so it was level playing field. I was remote and so was everybody else, so I didn't miss out anything on that. But I think more importantly, the experts that came every week was very, very helpful because as a founder, what I've had to do in the last few months is like, I feel like I'm constantly trying to learn something new. Like, there is some area that my skills are short. So I spent a month reading just sales books. How do you build a sales structure? How do you hire salespeople? What do you ask in sales interviews? Things like that. There's a month I spent reading about HR and culture and employee motivation, and payroll and benefits, and like that was all I was doing. I was just obsessed with all kinds of payroll and HR questions and employee surveys and pulse checks. And so, as you build these skills, it's not like I'm an expert in all of them, but I need to handle all of them at least till my team has more experts. So, having these experts was a great forum for me to say, hey, these are some of the hypotheses that I am running with. Are they off? Am I like out of my mind doing something random, or at least it's in line with what you would think I should be doing? So that was very, very handy for me, at least I felt. Plus they were very positive, very encouraging. Maybe it's a Montreal thing, I don't know. um, but everyone was very, very supportive. A lot of them would actually go to my website and check us out before they spoke to us. So they had done homework, they had thought about problems and solutions before they came to the session. So kudos to all of them and you guys for bringing such helpful people together. But I think that was my biggest gain, was being able to validate my various hypotheses that, yep, this is right, wrong, or requires this amount of tweaks.
Yeah. Now, experts, I think, are one of the most valuable parts of the program, and yeah, I think it's you do them justice by thanking them. 164 different experts throughout
Oh, wow.
Ascension have came and given their time and advice. So, yeah, I agree, Toby. I'd be curious to hear of what you thought and how it was back in 2018.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I had so I think maybe us was a little bit different than your experience, Kashfu. Also, I had it was very, very, very valuable and useful. I think the big difference is that when I came into Ascension, I wasn't necessarily thinking about what we were doing that much in terms of a business. It was really, as I was talking about, almost like an intellectual question, a problem that we're trying to solve. And I think what Ascension enabled us to do is take that sort of problem we are trying to solve, that intellectual question, and transform it into a business. And that I think without that we wouldn't be where we are today. We wouldn't have made the decisions we made. So that's really the core thing. Just showing us and teaching us how you can take this concept, this idea, this problem, and surround yourself with the right people, connect with the right users or customers who have this problem, and transform into a business. So that's the main thing.
Cool. Well, you, Toby, leaving or ending rather Ascension in 2018. Now that Kashfu is 1 week out of ending the program, what was that transition phase like? Because then you obviously went on to do other competitions and programs.
Right.
What was that like? And then Kashfu, I'd like to hear, what's your plan now moving forward?
Yeah. So I'd say for us that was it was kind of it was a harder period, I'd say, because you're surrounded by people around you giving you support and helping you, and then all of a sudden you end up not as well surrounded or with as much support. And so I'd say for us that was a bit more difficult, that time period. But as you said, we went on to do different programs, different competitions, and things ramped up slowly. But I think what's really important, and what I learned out of that, is how important it is just to surround yourself well. To stay close to people, to stay connected, And really, there's no reason because Ascension finishes to, to not continue, working with FinTech Cadence, and to I think those relationships have to continue. The support has to continue, and the best way to think about an acceleration program like that is something that really the most possible is ongoing, and the most possible is a resource that will be there, for the next few months and years to come. So I think probably that's a mistake on my behalf not to have taken advantage of that as much as I should have. So I'd say for you, Kashbu, I mean, if I can say anything, having finished it before, I'd say, stay involved, keep people close to you, and it'll make things easier that way. Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, Kashbu, what's your well, now taking these words of wisdom from Toby, is that in line with what you're planning on doing, or?
I'm always taking that as an advice because, I mean, as you probably know, Nick, I always had complaints. We need more time with experts. I wish this was longer. I wish I could follow up. But a lot of them have been actually quite helpful. And I did reach out to some of them later, and they were open to giving me time, answering some more of my questions. But I guess it was easy because it was structured before, and so I didn't have to make that effort. So to Toby's point, maybe now I think it's something that I need to plan for, because almost all of them were very, very helpful and willing to provide ideas or just even brainstorm, like, okay, these are my three options and they are all three equally good or equally bad. What do I do from here? But I'll take it as advice that it's important to stay connected.
Yeah. Another thing, Kashbu, I don't know for you. For me, it was that when I did Ascension, and even after Ascension, I still, I was not working on Aquantix full time. It was really a part-time thing at that point. So, that made it, difficult for me to prioritize my own time, my own decisions. I was, I guess, working as a doctor, so I had, patients and responsibilities there that were significant, and at the same time, I had a Quantix that was on the side that would work on the evening. But when you work in the evening, people are not available. People work during the day, so there's all this complexity around that, which was an issue for me. So if you have already, I don't know if you've already, I understand that you are already working full time. I think that's way better, and that makes things much easier too. What you're doing.
Yeah, I don't know how though you managed being a doctor and doing something on the side. Clearly, that isn't the kind of profession you associate with a side hustle. So kudos to you.
No. It wasn't. It was definitely not ideal. So a lot of nights without sleeping, and a lot of that. But now I'm super happy. I think it was really worth it, and I have no regrets. So it's all good.
Awesome. Well, to the both of you, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your advice amidst your very busy schedules. But for everyone listening who took the chance to listen to both your experiences, we just want to let you know that for the Ascension 2021 program, it's already open, and hopefully people who participate in next year's program will be able to take the valuable advice you've shared today and inspire themselves from your paths. And for those who maybe don't yet have a startup or won't be ready for Ascension, we do have Formathon coming up in 3 weeks' time. So Formathon is an awesome 3-week open innovation competition where people from across Canada could participate. We give the challenges. So there are already validated problems, which is often a big challenge for first-time entrepreneurs. You're building a solution without actually having a problem there. So if you just want to get your feet wet, if you're a medical doctor, an engineer, a painter, whatever the case may be, everybody can get involved and learn a ton. And who knows where you'll end up in a couple of years' time. So I invite you guys to check it out if you want to learn more. fintechcadence.com/Formathon, and to apply for Ascension/Ascension. Kashbu, Toby, thank you so much for taking the time. Great catching up with the both of you, and congratulations again. and
Thank you.
to see what the rest of 2020 brings to the both of you.
Absolutely. It was great, Nick. Thanks for your time.
Yeah. Thank you, Nick. Thanks, Toby. Nice to meet you as well.
All right. Nice to meet you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care now.